Good morning and peace be upon you wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I, my friends, am exhausted. We had a lot to cover today, but it has been an exhausting week for me for good reasons, for very good reasons. So I ran my first half marathon that I run in 7 years, and while I felt like absolute trash during the race, I ran only a minute slower than I ran 7 years ago. So I'm happy about that. And it gives me a good base to build for. My goal, and I want you all to keep me honest about this, is to run a second half marathon before the year is out and then run my first marathon next year, which would be my first marathon since 2016. So the first one in a decade. I think I can do it. I'm gonna go after it. I'm eating better. I've gotten in much better shape, not where I want to be, but after I ran that half marathon, the very next day, I was in New Mexico for the week. I'm on the board of Common Defense, and we were talking about what veterans can be doing and what we need to be doing to stop the rise of fascism in this country. Got to hang out with former Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, some other amazing leaders around the country. And, I think there is a growing awareness of how serious the situation has become. Uh, Initially, I think people threw out the word fascism because the act was fascistic, but there was no real, emphasis behind it. But now I think folks are recognizing that what the Trump regime is doing really is authoritarianism, really is undermining basic due process, basic constitutional principles, and it is encouraging to see the number of veterans, the number of folks aligning and getting ready to respond in a meaningful way, whether that's by running for office, donating to candidates who are people funded, just raising their voice more aggressively, going to marches, signing petitions, hounding their members of Congress at town halls, and demanding something more than a stupid, strongly worded letter. We have a long way to go, but that's where I was this week, and the work continues because we know that the Trump regime is not slowing down. And so I want to cover three main things today on today's show. One, documenting the death of our republic. When we talk about what authoritarianism looks like, I really want to quantify that this is not just hyperbole. We're not just saying things to sound alarmist. We're documenting this. These are factual, and it's happening in real time in front of us. And I also want to talk about how we're fighting back, particularly with corporate boycotts. And the fact is, corporate boycotts are working, and the data shows that they're having a significant impact on some of these corporations and letting them know that this is not sustainable the way you're capitulating to Trump, and it's costing them billions of dollars, if not more. And I think we're going to continue to see that, but we have to keep the pressure on and make sure they hear us. Third, I want to talk about the new Muslim ban that Trump just announced last week. It's like Muslim ban 1.0, but 2.0. It's more expansive, it's more cruel, and it's completely illogical. It doesn't actually create any sense of safety. I'll break it down for you and kind of share what's happening there. And then another tragic story from UnitedHealth. Another 22-year-old young person, um, uh, Cole was his name, asthma patient, died. He died because UnitedHealth jacked up his medication from $55 for his inhaler refill to $700. Think about that. $55 up to $700, and he wasn't able to get the care he needed. He died. And so we'll talk about that. I'm realizing more than three things now. But and then finally, I want to talk about this Musk and Trump fight. And while I think it's entertaining and quite comical and pathetic, I also want to provide some context around it to make sure we're not distracted from doing the work that needs to get done. Because this work has to get done. And remember, Musk is not the friend of people in the working class. He's not. And he's an avowed racist. He's made that extremely clear. And what's that old saying that uh, I actually disagree with the old saying that says that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, the enemy of my enemy is not my friend. In this case, this is another billionaire who is leeching off the American working class, and we need to recognize him as such. All right, let's talk about the death of our republic because this is something that is, I wrote this mainly because folks think that we're overreacting when we talk about our denying democracy or degrading democracy. Marco Rubio just announced that the Trump regime will deny foreign visas to visas of foreign nationals who criticize the state of Israel. Elon Musk has called Doge's policy cuts as heroic, when in reality they can be tied to at least 300,000 deaths and counting. The Supreme Court just criminalized 500,000 documented immigrants because Trump asked them to. And MAGA Senator Joni Ernst mocked her constituents who shared their fear of dying due to these ridiculous cuts and told them that they can be saved by accepting Jesus. I'm not exaggerating. I absolutely am not exaggerating. So it's imperative we recognize this right-wing fascism consuming our government. And so let's start with this idea of Marco Rubio banning people who criticize Israel. He's announced that the Trump regime will deny visas to any foreign nationals who criticize Israel. And he's claiming that it's to combat anti-Semitism. So if that's the case, I wonder, when is Rubio going to demand accountability for Trump? Or has Marco Rubio forgotten Trump's long and sordid history of anti-Semitism himself? This is the man who said that there were very fine people on both sides after neo-Nazis marched through Charlottesville chanting Jews will not replace us. This is the man who dined with Holocaust deniers and has never once retracted his decision to have dinner at his home with Holocaust deniers. This is the man who has repeatedly trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies about money and dual loyalties. So for his regime to now claim the mantle of defending Jewish people against anti-Semitism, it's not just hypocritical, it's grotesque, it's dangerous. Because it defines what he did as not anti-Semitic, and what everybody else does is automatically anti-Semitic. The word loses all meaning at that point. But there's an even deeper issue at hand here. Because let's be clear, hate for Jewish people is anti-Semitic, right? Hating Jewish people for being Jewish is despicable. It must be condemned with the full force of the law, a full stop. No buts, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's done. Because people have rights. That's why anti-Semitism is wrong. Because people have rights. So you can't hate people for their immutable characteristics and pretend it's okay. It's not. People have rights. That's what human rights are. States, meanwhile, do not have rights. There's no such thing as a universal declaration of states' rights. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Because states are not human beings. Like, this is second grade common sense. So criticizing the state of Israel for injustices committed by the state of Israel is not anti-Semitism. It's free speech. It's an act of democratic accountability. It's what people committed to justice do. And most importantly, it's what the First Amendment of the United States Constitution protects. Marco Rubio is ripping up the Constitution in real time to defend a foreign state that is committing genocide. And because states don't have rights, he's denying basic free speech. Human beings have rights, and human rights exist to protect people, not states, especially not protect states that are committing genocide. And so the Trump regime eviscerating free speech and weaponizing immigration law to silence criticism of a foreign government, all under the absurd pretense of fighting anti-Semitism, is not democracy, it's dictatorship. This is what fascism and authoritarianism looks like, and we need to continue to call it out. I wonder where all the free speech warriors are who constantly scream about the importance of free speech, that they need to, have the freedom to offend even. Because look, technically speaking, while I find anti-Semitism grotesque and disgusting, even that, under this Constitution's interpretation of free speech, is still protected free speech. It may have consequences, and I hope it does. I hope people who are anti-Semitic or racist or misogynistic face consequences as the law requires and allows. But at the end of the day, to go even a step further than that and deny the ability to even criticize a government is wild. I was born in Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, mind you. If somebody criticizes Pakistan, does not make them Islamophobic, does not make them anti-Muslim. No, they're criticizing a government. Saudi Arabia is a Muslim majority country that hosts the Kaaba, the holiest place in the world for Muslims. If you criticize Saudi Arabia, you're not anti-Muslim. You're criticizing a government. We need to recognize this fact. And so the reality is that this is an assault on our free speech, and we need to recognize how dangerous it actually is. Because if they can criminalize criticizing a government, well, then you've lost your free speech. You've lost your ability to express dissent. And however you feel about Israel, whether you think it's the greatest thing that ever happened in humanity or you think it's the worst thing that ever happened in humanity, the fact remains that if a government can tell you that you're going to prison because they didn't like what you said about the state of Israel, well, then everything can be a criticism. And that's a problem. That's why states don't have rights, guys. All right, when we come back from break, we're going to dive into what devastation has been left in the wake of Doge and how we need to recognize that Musk is definitely not our friend here. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can continue to create this content for you. All right, we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're talking about the degradation of our democracy under this Trump regime. We just finished talking about how the Trump administration, Trump regime, is now criminalizing or wants to criminalize this, criticizing the state of Israel, and how that is absolutely an assault on our free speech. But it gets worse, unfortunately, because now we also have Doge and the death and devastation from Doge. The promise was from Elon Musk was that he was going to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget by running the government like a business. And this was an asinine claim from the get-go. It wasn't possible, first of all, practically. And two, the idea of running the government like a business is kind of fundamentally the problem. This is a libertarian dream that has no place with adults or people with common sense. It's nonsense. The government is not a business. It is not a for-profit enterprise. It is a means of service for all people to promote the general welfare for all people. And the idea that the post office, for example, or that healthcare, for example, or that health education should be for profit is asinine. It's absolutely asinine. There are businesses for that, and that's what businesses should do. But the government should provide these basic guarantees to promote the general welfare as our founding documents require of us. Well, so he establishes Doge, and interestingly enough, starts to attack those parts of the government that are investigating him and his company for illegal activities and gets those shut down. So if you don't see the open corruption there, I don't know what to tell you. You've probably been hiding in a cave in Mars with your eyes covered and your ears closed. But now, as this special government job has come to a conclusion and the Trump Musk honeymoon is over, all that he's left behind is just a trail of carnage and destruction. According to new scholarship, Musk's approach to governance has already resulted in the deaths of at least 300,000 people, most of them children, many of them AIDS patients. Why? Because he gutted humanitarian aid. Remember, he shut down USAID almost completely. And tens of millions of people globally relied on USAID, and he shut it down. Brooke Nichols, who's an associate professor of global health at Boston University, did a research paper to estimate that Musk's budget cuts have already caused 300,000 deaths and will likely cause significantly more by the end of the year. They're talking to north of 10 million at this rate globally. That's unheard of. This is what Musk's foray into politics has accomplished: mass death through manufactured austerity. Like, the fact remains, billionaires don't know how to govern. I don't know why people keep trusting billionaires. They don't know how to govern. They know how to exploit. They know how to avoid taxes. They know how to consolidate power. And if you can point to me one or two billionaires who are the exception, great. Exceptions still prove the rule. You could probably find one or two billionaires who have done a decent job. In fact, Governor Pritzker comes to mind of Illinois. He's done a decent job, I think, but he is the exception to the rule. We see how many billionaires were standing with Trump at his inauguration, all there because they wanted a personal favor to gain even more power, even more tax cuts, and even less accountability. So until we tax billionaires out of existence, and I mean that, I don't mean tax them at a high rate. I don't mean tax them at a fair rate, whatever people think that means. No, we need to tax them out of existence. Until we do that, they will continue to use their wealth to kill the most vulnerable among us. Stop trusting billionaires and start taxing them. And don't give me this line of, oh, well, most of their wealth is tied up in stocks. Is that actual liquid capital? Okay, let's go with that argument. If it's not real wealth, then stop letting them use that not real wealth to get loans and to leverage for collateral to be able to access billions in wealth. If it's just paper money, then why is it real collateral? And you can't have it both ways. Either it's not real wealth, in which case banks should say, sorry, until you actually sell this and have liquid capital, we're not going to support you on anything. Or if it is real wealth, then tax them out of existence. We can even either have a functioning democracy or we can have billionaires. We can't have both. And it's part of that billionaire investment, and I call it an investment and a bribe in the Supreme Court that has gotten us to a right-wing Supreme Court that is making these horrible rulings that are stripping away our rights. Leonard Leo is the billionaire who has made this the right-wing Supreme Court that it is. You need to understand that. And every single horrible ruling you're seeing in the Supreme Court, whether it's to gut Roe v. Wade, whether it's to strip down affirmative action, whether it's to gut the Voting Rights Act, whether it's to gut the EPA, whether it's to gut food safety standards and more, and immigration, destroy immigration rights, this is all due to a billionaire buying the right-wing Supreme Court and making it what it is today. And so then there's the latest Trump regime victory at the Supreme Court, a ruling that just renders 500,000 previously documented immigrants to be undocumented overnight. Swipe of the pen. Political reports that the Trump regime can now cancel a Biden-era humanitarian program that allowed immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua, and Venezuela to live and work legally in the United States. And leading this charge is none other than Marco Rubio himself, who, by the way, is Cuban and the son of Cuban immigrants who fled to Cuba. Rubio, who once said, in writing, by the way, in his book, that if he had to break immigration laws to take care of his family, he would. That man who wrote that, is now criminalizing immigrants who follow the letter of the law. Like, it'd be hypocritical enough if he attacked immigrants who are undocumented. But he's now criminalizing immigrants who are documented, who followed the letter of the law. They did everything right, the right way. You know how you hear these MAGA folks say, well, we don't oppose legal immigration. We just oppose illegal immigration. If you come the right way, we got no problem with you. Well, these 500,000 came the right way. They were legal. They were documented. They were here as the laws allowed them to be. And now they're being made criminals. It's cruelty for cruelty's sake. It's fascism. It's yet another reminder that whenever MAGA cultists claim they only oppose illegal immigration, they're lying. Their opposition has never been about the law. It has always been about race. It has always been about upholding white supremacy. Understand this, that MAGA is not a political ideology. It's a white supremacist cult. The again in MAGA refers to returning America to the period of Jim Crow, where black and brown people couldn't immigrate. And it's worth noting their hijacking of Christianity to make their cruel policies seem divinely sanctioned. Speaking of divinely sanctioned, that was Joni Ernst's response at a recent town hall when she was asked by a constituent in deep fear about just what is going to happen if these cuts go through. Denied healthcare. CBO reports that 11 million people will lose their healthcare access if these cuts go through. 11 million. A Yale study said that 51,000 people will die due to lack of healthcare if these cuts go through. Lack of SNAP and TANF, people will starve. So somebody asked Joni Ernst what they'll do because they are afraid that they're going to die. And rather than delve into her unhinged and cruel remarks to a constituent, I put out a video rebuttal that I'm going to play right now. Check this out.
I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday.
I'm so glad you're going to apologize. All they say about Republicans is that they never admit when they're wrong, that they're arrogant, that they're self-righteous. But I'm glad to see you apologize. So let's have at it.
See, I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die."
And she said that because we know that these policies enacted by the Trump regime and Elon Musk are actually killing people. A recent report said 300,000 people have already been killed because of the gutting of US aid. And now gutting Medicaid and Medicare and SNAP and TANF, people are going to die. I'm glad you caught that. You caught that, right?
I made an incorrect assumption.
Here we go. Here comes the apology.
That everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth.
Everyone does understand that. The problem isn't that people think we're going to magically live forever. The problem is that people see us dying right now. There's a reason why the United States has the lowest life expectancy in the developed world. It's because of barbaric policies like this. Where is this apology you were talking about?
So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy.
I'm beginning to think this is not an apology. What the hell does the tooth fairy have to do with you starving people to death?
But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life.
Nobody is here looking for eternal and everlasting life. We just want to make sure we can feed our children and not die from starvation and lack of health care.
I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
You're serious. Let me remind you all why we need separation of religion and state, because we get these right-wing nut jobs like this person who has no regard for the actual suffering that people are feeling right now and just wants to evangelize their religion. If you truly did follow the example of Jesus Christ, you would be rushing to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and heal the sick. But the fact that you're doing the opposite shows that your motivation is not actually Jesus Christ, it's white supremacy and greed.
So this is not just about policy disagreements. This is about the comprehensive degradation of our democracy, of our constitution, and of our most basic shared values. From banning free speech to criminalizing humanitarian aid to turning legal immigrants into undocumented targets to cruelly mocking working people who are genuinely concerned about whether they can feed their children, we are watching Trumpism transform the United States into an authoritarian state right before our very eyes. We can stop this, but it starts by calling it what it is. We can act, but we must know how to act. And you do that by continuing to raise your voice. There are some effective measures that have had an impact, and we're seeing that come into play. And one of those really effective measures is boycotts. Corporations are learning that boycotts work. These are the corporations that are buying these politicians, that are capitulating to Trumpism, and we're seeing it work. Somewhere in a corporate boardroom right now, a CEO is crying into a $12,000 espresso machine on how it all went wrong. And it went wrong because they're bending the knee to Trump's bigotry, and now they're paying for it. Turns out when you slap the public in the face with fascism, they don't come back for more. Target, Tesla, large law firms, the Washington Post, these are all the latest faces of corporations who have capitulated to bigotry and are now paying the price. And I want to share these examples for two reasons. One, because I want you guys to see that the work we're doing is working. Even though it's not as apparent and as fast as we want it to be, we are making progress. And two, I want you guys to pile on, because we need to pile on to make sure that this message gets heard loud and clear. Let's look at Target, for example. In January, Target announced it would phase out all DEI initiatives, particularly those intended to ensure a more meaningful representation of Black employees. So in response, Georgia pastor Reverend Jamal Bryant, a Black pastor in Georgia, called for a 40-day boycott of Target. Powerful. Now he's called to extend that. And the American people have responded. This is, I talked to non-Black people. This is a good way of being allies to Black people in this one. Listen to what Reverend Bryant is saying. And the result is a massive drop in foot traffic and revenue and profits. Target is now seeing its worst performance in nearly a decade. By some estimates, Target has already lost $12.4 billion in valuation, with online sales and in-store sales all trending downward. All of this due to Target's cowardly retreat from diversity, which, by the way, only came about because a few loud extremists got upset that Target dared to be inclusive. And for those wondering, well, where do I shop? Costco is an excellent place to shop. I'm not going to argue it's perfect because I don't think any corporation is, but I give them credit for one, leaning into DEI. Their CEO was asked about this, and he goes, "Why wouldn't we lean into this? Why wouldn't we lean into our consumer base and make sure that our consumers have what they need?" And then two, and this part I'm really grateful for Costco, is they pay their employees an actual living wage. Somewhere around 22 bucks an hour. And while it's not as high as I'd want it to be, I'd want it to be closer to 30 for their minimum wage. But nonetheless, 22 bucks an hour is a far cry above the 7.25 an hour federal minimum wage and the 11 or 12 bucks an hour the Target pays its employees as well. So keep that boycott going. Let Target know that we're not going to tolerate their capitulation to Trump. And hopefully they change their minds. But remember, this came about because a black pastor, Reverend Jamal Bryant, took the lead, called for the boycott, and the American people are responding. So continue to respond as best as you can. And by the way, you can also throw on other major corporations like Walmart and Amazon who are exploitative to their employees too. But all right, Tesla. Fascism doesn't sell EVs, and we've seen this already happening. Remember when Tesla was innovative? At one point, I admit, early on, I think probably about 10 years ago, I even put down a deposit for a Tesla. And as I got to see who Elon Musk was, I took my deposit back and it was like, nope, I will not be involved with this guy because this dude is wild. Now, a Tesla is basically the political equivalent of a Confederate flag. I mean, it's just ridiculous. After Elon Musk openly echoed Nazi talking points, praised Trump like a fanboy at a fascist fanboy convention, even though they're enemies now, and made Twitter a playground for bigots. It will always be Twitter in this house, by the way. The world responded. We stopped buying Teslas. Global Tesla sales are collapsing. In some countries, sales have dropped as much as 49%. He has somehow managed to turn electric vehicles into a right-wing culture war. And that is incredible. I mean, that's a special kind of talent to take EVs into a right-wing culture war. And like, what were you thinking? The right doesn't want EVs. They want their, gas guzzling Hummers because they have no care for the environment. The left wants EVs. So why would you piss off your base? It makes no sense at all. And again, this goes back to why we need to tax billionaires. Because if he wasn't a billionaire and had to worry about money like the rest of us do, then he would take smarter decisions and not do Nazi stuff. Like that's common sense. But when you have somebody with unlimited wealth that's exploiting the government to get even more unlimited wealth, then yeah, this is what happens. But again, I'm sharing this because it's an example of the boycott working. So kudos to y'all. Third example is law firms, the $100 million mistake. Look, as an attorney myself, it pains me to see law firms bend the knee to Donald Trump. Law firms are supposed to be leading the charge to uphold justice, not be siding with the Sith Lord himself. Uh, several have taken their turns to throw their lot with Trump, giving him over $100 million in pro bono legal services. Apparently, they missed the memo that helping a wannabe dictator dodge justice is not the best look. A Wall Street Journal report concludes that legal executives from at least 11 major companies are redirecting assignments away from firms that made pacts with the White House. Oracle, Morgan Stanley, an unnamed airline, a pharmaceutical company, and McDonald's have all moved or considered moving legal work, in some cases explicitly citing dissatisfaction with the firm's response to the White House pressure. Microsoft, who by no means is an ethical company in this space, even Microsoft raised concerns of conflict of interest with Latham Watkins, temporarily removing the firm from its preferred counsel list before reinstating it after further discussion. So this doesn't even include the top lawyers who resigned from these so-called top law firms, objecting to their firm's capitulation to fascism. And, this is a bipartisan failure. I'm always going to keep it 100. Former First Gentleman Doug Emhoff, his firm capitulated to Trump and donated over 100 million in free services. And Doug Emhoff is a partner at that firm. I think he's getting like 5 million a year. So law firms are not paying the price as clients are fleeing to other firms who refuse to succumb to this Trumpism and this fascism. And of course, as we know, Washington Post has lost more than 500,000 subscribers. And so that's what happens again when you capitulate to, as Amazon has and Jeff Bezos has to Trumpian fascism. So let's be clear. This isn't just a series of unrelated corporate blunders. This is power from organized people and conscious resistance. This is what happens when people say enough So keep that in mind. Your dollar is your voice. And when you choose not to spend it on institutions that uphold bigotry and fascism, it sends a clear message loud and clear, louder than any tweet ever could. We are witnessing, experts are saying that we are witnessing likely the most effective economic boycott since the Montgomery bus boycott. Target and Tesla and these law firms and legacy media, they're feeling these consequences because we are aligned. And so what we do next is we keep the pressure on. We double down on supporting local businesses, right? Instead of getting a cake from Target, find a local cake maker, spend a few bucks more and support that local business. Instead of ordering something off of the internet, just take a stroll down to a local street if you can and find something from a local shop that fits that. Invest in independent writers who are talking about this stuff. Subscribe to my Substack and help me continue to elevate this information rather than legacy corporate media like the Washington Post, who is ultimately funding a billionaire. Take stock of where you are spending your funds and see how you can change your spending habits to support more of these local businesses, independent businesses, local writers, independent thought leaders. Because this isn't just about economics, it's about integrity. And integrity, like democracy, only survives if we actually fight for it. We are seeing that boycotts work. That should give you some hope. Let's double down and get our friends and family involved. All right, you're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back from break, we will talk about the revised Muslim ban, the Trump Musk feud, and what happens when strong women intimidate weak men. Oh, and we'll also talk about how UnitedHealth led to the preventable death of yet another innocent person. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM. If you're on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I wanted to really quickly talk about two amazing women, Greta Thunberg and Miss Rachel, who, while the world's most powerful institutions are complicit in genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, these women are loudly rising up for justice, undaunted, unapologetic, unbowed, unfazed. Greta Thunberg and Miss Rachel are showing the world what real courage looks like, and weak men are responding with violence. For the past 20 months, Greta Thunberg has fearlessly spoken up about the genocide in Gaza, and now she's on a flotilla heading to Gaza to deliver life-saving aid and stand in solidarity with a people suffering genocide. This isn't just activism. This is defiance against injustice, and it's amazing. This is what leadership looks like. Ms. Rachel, meanwhile, beloved children's content creator whose platform reaches just hundreds of millions of families, she could have stayed silent. She could have said, hey, this is my livelihood. I'm just going to stay silent. She could have pretended that Gaza doesn't affect her and just played it safe. Instead, she chose to speak out, to humanize Palestinian children, to call out injustice, and to embrace Palestinian children with open arms. And as a result, she is being called anti-Semitic. They are accusing her of being funded by Hamas. Even the New York Times is reprinting this nonsense. And it's amazing to me how these two women have more courage than every political leader in the world combined. There are numerous other women. I'm just focused on these two because they're in the news right now. But the response has been disgusting. What these women are getting in return for their moral clarity and courage are threats. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, yes, Senator Lindsey Graham. By the way, last week we had Dr. Annie Andrews on who's running against Lindsey Graham, so we need to support Annie Andrews. But Lindsey Graham posted a veiled threat saying, "Hope Greta and her friends can swim." This isn't a joke. It's a U.S. senator threatening a young woman for trying to deliver aid. Israeli-based international human rights lawyer, I don't even like calling him a human rights lawyer, but Arn Ostrovsky describes Thunberg as a, quote, little jihadi, and sneered that it would be, quote, so sad if something were to happen to her flotilla. He later deleted that tweet, but this isn't advocacy. This isn't what a human rights lawyer does. This is incitement. It's disgusting. It's pathetic. It's from someone who dares call themselves a human rights lawyer, when in actuality, no one who is an actual human rights lawyer, let alone a decent human being, would make these kinds of threats to innocent people. An actual human rights lawyer like myself, who actually cares for all humanity, would never do something so horrifying. But this is where we are in the world today. And then there's corporate media. Instead of celebrating Ms. Rachel's bravery, the New York Times launches a hit piece pushing baseless conspiracy theories that she's, quote, being paid by Hamas. Just utter nonsense, and another reflection of how corporate media is continuing to fail us. So very simple asks, continue to stand with them, elevate their content, let them know that you support them, tweet them on social media, post them on threads on Instagram, and just let them know that you have their support. Because I'm telling you, that kind of hate is overwhelming. It can be suffocating, it can be drowning, and it can be hard to get through. But when they know that they have the support of the many, of the masses, then it helps immensely. So elevate their platforms, do what's in your power to give these courageous women the support they need and deserve, and continue to speak up because there's nothing weak men fear more than courageous women who have won the hearts of the people. All right, shifting gears, I want to shift to a tragic story of United Health once more. It feels like we have more and more of these every single week, but this is the world that we're in right now. If you followed my writing, my advocacy, my work here on Sirius XM, you've seen my extensive coverage of how the health insurance industry exploits working people in this country, including I've shared intimately about my wife and I have an amazing now 9-year-old daughter and how health insurance corporations continue to deny her aid, and to the point where it could have been fatal. And we're extraordinarily fortunate that we are now getting the aid we need. We still have a long way to go. But this is near and dear to my heart. And today I write about another horrifying story, read about another horrifying story, that of 22-year-old Cole Schmidtnacht. When Cole walked into his pharmacy to refill his asthma medication, he saw something that he hadn't seen before, a disgustingly high price tag. The inhaler that once cost him just under $70 has suddenly jumped to over $500. And so, like millions of working class Americans, he didn't have the extra $500 lying around to spend on the same medicine that he had always used to stay alive. I mean, just think about that price jump. So he left with a cheaper inhaler that was there for emergency reasons, but didn't actually give him the care he needed. 5 days later, Cole had a massive asthma attack. His inhaler was empty. He collapsed, never again to regain consciousness. He died. Just 5 days later, he died at 22 years old from asthma in the richest country in the world. And unsurprisingly, the corporation behind his denied care was once again United Health. United Health, of course, their CEO, Brian Thompson, was allegedly killed by Luigi Mangione. So let me be clear. This killing of Cole was not an unavoidable tragedy. It was a profit-driven execution. Cole's death was preventable, but he was killed by a system designed to exploit, designed to deny, designed to dehumanize working class people for shareholder value, for billionaire shareholder value. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. We don't have healthcare corporations in this country. We have HEL corporations, health exploitation limited liability corporations. Their business model is very simple. Deny care, cash in, call it cost savings, and call it increased shareholder value. That's what happened here. Cole's insurance coverage was managed by OptumRx, a pharmacy benefit manager under the United Health Group. Yeah, again, the same United Health whose CEO was allegedly killed by Luigi Mangione. And per his family, that price jump was beyond Cole's means. He left the pharmacy without the medication. A HEL corporation apparently knowingly denied him the medicine he needed to live, knowing full well that he will die without that medication. We have to stop pretending this is normal. And meanwhile, when you talk about, health, it stands for health exploitation limited liability. Well, Cole's family sued, and United Health has responded by filing what's called a motion to dismiss. This is a motion to the judge that says, Your Honor, there's no case here. Nothing happened. That's illegal. Just dismiss it, and limit our liability. It's saying that we're not even going to entertain the idea or allow the entertaining of the idea that we did something wrong. So they're asking the judge to just dismiss it altogether. In response to Cole's death, because he couldn't afford medicine he was prescribed, this multi-billion, multinational corporation is more concerned with escaping accountability than saving lives, changing the policy to save lives. Remember, a Yale study published in The Lancet has already found that 68,000 Americans die every single year simply because they lack access to basic health care. 68,000. And yet our politicians, left and right, still submit themselves to this healthcare lobby and to these health corporations. and let these health corporations run our country. So how many more need to die? And I say this with the full weight of personal grief. I lost my cousin, my first cousin, to an asthma attack for the same reason. Didn't have access to his inhaler. How many more parents have to bury their children before we finally recognize that healthcare is a human right, not a line item to be auctioned off for stock buybacks? In the United States alone, asthma kills about 4,000 people a year. Most of them are preventable deaths. And by the way, United Health, while it's trying to file a motion to dismiss, the DOJ had opened a criminal fraud investigation last year into the Medicare practices. So this is not an isolated incident. A 5-year investigation that concluded last year into United Health's practices found that OptumRx, the same group farm benefit manager, along with two of its main peers, Express Scripts and CVS Caremark, have pocketed an extra 7.3 billion over the cost thanks to price gouging. They're overcharging cancer patients by more than 1,000%. This is who these people are. Pocketing an extra $7 billion by overcharging cancer patients, by gouging cancer patients, knowing full well they can't do a damn thing if we don't give them the medication. Let's just jack it up as high as we can. This is the cruelty of these billion-dollar corporations. This is why we cannot tolerate them under any circumstance. So every politician, Republican or Democrat, who refuses to declare healthcare a human right, this is on your hands. You are responsible for these deaths. 68,000 people a year die unnecessarily because it's more important for you to get a campaign donation than it is to ensure people have the basic health care that they need. Remember Cole's story, remember his parents who now bear tattoos of the suffering that he went through. And look, this is not a complicated side to be on. This is not left versus right. This is not conservative versus liberal or progressive versus Democrat conservative. This is none of that stuff. This is working people against billion-dollar corporations. That's what this fundamentally comes down to. Asthma, these kinds of diseases don't care what political party you belong to at all. They never have, they never will. We need to have solidarity in this space. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I want to close by talking about the Musk-Trump fiasco and how Trump is reviving the Muslim ban. Let's start with the Trump-Musk fiasco. There's clearly been an end to the honeymoon that they're going through. And I see people online celebrating and cheering, and people are attacking me for saying we shouldn't. Look, have fun at their expense. Laugh at their expense. Go for it. My point is only this. This is a distraction. Billionaires will always support billionaires. Yeah, they're fighting with each other right now, but at the end of the day, they have class solidarity with one another. And as history has always shown us, not just American history, world history has always shown us, billionaires will always support billionaires. And when they fight not with their own resources, they send poor people at each other to fight. That's how it works. They manipulate working class people against each other. To them, this is all a game of chess, and they fancy themselves some grand chess master. That's really it. And so don't fall into this trap of thinking that this rift between them is somehow going to benefit us. At the end of the day, I just shared how 300,000 people are now dead because of these Doge cuts. And how many more are going to die because of these cuts that aren't going to be undone. So even if this rift happens and is permanent, the damage has already been done. People are already suffering immensely. What we need to do now is to stay focused and in the immediate future prevent this horrific bill from becoming law. This budget bill. This budget bill that is going to strip 11 million people from healthcare, result in an extra 51,000 deaths annually at a minimum. It's going to gut our food safety. It's going to give AI unrestricted deregulation. It's going to give billionaires even more tax cuts, devastating the working class even more. That's what we got to stay focused on right now. Because while these two are fighting, like petulant children, the rest of us are suffering immensely. So yeah, if you want to laugh at their expense, go for it. Just don't let it slow you down from doing the work that needs to be done. And right now, one of the work that needs to be done is combating this revival of this Muslim ban. It's not just a return to cruelty of its first term, it's an escalation. And while the earlier version of this policy tried and failed to hide behind ambiguous language, this one dispenses it without any pretense. It names names, it bans nations, and it makes it abundantly clear that Trump is targeting the same people, black and brown people, Muslim majority countries that pose no credible national security threat, but he just seems, undesirable. It's not only a cruel policy, it's also extremely expensive, and it will cost us tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars more. Uh, so first of all, who's banned? As you know, uh, I'm not Donald Trump's favorite person. I'm an American Muslim, I'm an immigrant, I'm a human rights lawyer, I'm a person of color. I say all this to point out that Donald Trump probably does not like me very much. Now, when I look at the people he's banning, there are people who like me. It's pretty clear. Uh, he writes in his executive order that, quote, I have determined to fully restrict and limit the entry of nationals of the following 12 countries: Afghanistan, Burma, we'll talk about that, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. These restrictions distinguish between, but apply to both, the entry of immigrants and non-immigrants. And then he has partial bans on Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. First of all, Burma is a name that hasn't been used since 1989. It's Myanmar. The guy whines that people don't call it Gulf of America, but then he himself uses the name nearly 4 decades out of date. In any case, what do you notice about each of these countries? They're all majority black or brown. They're all, most are Muslim majority, and none of them are home to Trump-owned properties. And despite Trump citing the attack by an extremist on Jewish people in Boulder, Colorado last week as a reason for this ban, that person's from Egypt, and Egypt is not on this list at all. So this isn't immigration policy, it's white nationalism pandering in the language of security. And he's claiming he's banning these nations for national security purposes, but this claim and rationale fall apart immediately. First, he provides no actual evidence of any plot of violence or terrorism from any folks from these nations toward the United States. He's just making it up. But again, the lack of facts and evidence has never actually prevented Trump before from claiming something was true. But worse, the ban targets nations for supposedly having high visa overstay rates. And again, this makes no sense. There's no consideration for the people who are lawfully applying for asylum and overstaying, which is a process protected under international and US law. There's no consideration for people who do return home before their visas expire and follow immigration law. And there's absolutely no data suggesting that these overstay rates are tied to any kind of violence or national security risks. He's not solving anything here. He's just being racist. That's what it fundamentally comes down to. And the racism extends. He's allowing South Afrikaners, white refugees, from coming in who aren't actually suffering any harm, but banning Afghan refugees who helped us against the Taliban and now their lives are at risk. It is white supremacy through and through. And the last thing I'll point out is that the economic harm, the World Travel and Tourism Council has pointed out that we've already suffered 12.5 billion in losses of international visitor spending. Out of 185 countries that it monitors, the United States is the only one to see a decline in tourism in 2025. And that will continue now with this ban. So we are number one in losing money at this point because of this stupidity. It will harm people. It's just amazing what this man will do for the sake of bigotry and white nationalism, even that means destroying our entire economy. All right, my friends, I wanted to get that out to you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because it is your support that makes this possible. If you believe in the fight for human rights and justice and in protecting our most vulnerable neighbors, then support this work. Subscribe below, share with your friends and family, talk to your friends, get them engaged and involved. And as I said earlier, boycotts against bad actors work. So continue those collective actions of boycotts and invest in the people doing the good work. Invest with your time, invest with your trust, invest your resources. This is not just about Muslims or immigrants or refugees. It's about upholding foundational human rights for all people, and we cannot afford to sit silent during this difficult time. Whew, all right, another show in the books. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on social media across all platforms at Qasim Rashid. I will continue to advance a show that builds on justice and compassion and accountability for those in power. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got a great show lined up for next week. Same time, same place at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on Substack and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.